Welcome everyone to the Incite Group's webinar on turning social data into actionable intelligence. Over the next 50 minutes, we'll be discussing how to utilize your social listening and data to both positively impact future business decisions and ultimately help you understand your customers better. My name is Jack Edgar and I'm the project director here at the Incite Group, and I will be hosting today's webinar. The webinar actually forms part of the agenda for this year's Corporate Social Media Summit happening on June the 21st and the 22nd. The event brings together over 350 senior corporate executives from some of the world's biggest and most social brands, ultimately to discuss this year's most pressing social media challenges and opportunities, all of which, like this webinar, have been decided by the corporate social community, so you guys. Now, before we get started with today's discussion, I just want to remind you that we are recording the webinar, so everyone will receive the audio recordings at some point next week. The webinar is also very much interactive, so we'll have numerous anonymous polls taking place throughout the discussion. So I urge you, please do vote and get involved. I also urge you to type in your own questions into the chat box, ultimately so we can ensure that the insight is as tailored to your challenges as possible. So please don't be shy, do type them away, and I'll be sure to include them throughout the discussion. We're also using the hashtag CSMNY, which you should be able to see in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Again, any additional thoughts, any questions, any comments, please do tweet away. So I'm delighted to firstly introduce Angela Di Sarso, the Director of Social Media Marketing at Intuit. She's joining us over in the Bay Area. And then on a completely different time zone altogether, over in France, we have Giovanni Tavani, who's the Head of Global Social Media Support over at Dell. And then somewhere in between the two, we have Rebecca Lombardo, who's the Director of Strategic Services at Tracx. Welcome to you all. Now, before we get started with the discussion and indeed our first poll, I just wanted to let each of the speakers briefly introduce themselves, just to shed a little bit of light on their respective roles and their respective companies. So, Angela, over to you to begin with.
Thank you very much. And Jack, thank you very much for inviting me to participate today. I'm really looking forward to learning a lot from fellow panelists, Giovanni and Rebecca. And it looks like we have quite the Italian lineup today, except for you, Jack. So it's great to see. No, I am the Director of Social Media Marketing at Intuit, and specifically for our small business group. Part of my role, obviously, is to use social media to advance what we do for customers, but also setting up a center of excellence to help spread the use of social successfully throughout our organization. In previous lives, I also oversaw social for Hewlett-Packard, BlackBerry, and LPL Financial. So I've been in this realm for some time and really enjoy what I do, and I'm really excited to talk about using social data to do better and to do good.
Fantastic. And over to you, Giovanni.
Hi, Jack. Hi, everybody. Good, Jack, to talk to you again. I've been in Dell for about 15 years now. Previous to Dell, I have 4 years experience in HP between Europe and the Middle East. I now work for Dell pretty much based on an airplane, officially with a contract in France. I lead the social media customer services organization. I deal mainly with the non-English piece, though it's the same organization with the English one, so it's one team. And we are part of Global Services. Long success, long story short, is that we were 23 a little less than 3 years ago. We're over 200 today. So for all those who think that social media is fashion, that's wrong. Social media is here to stay, and I'm really hopeful. I'm really keen on listening to all of you guys and interact with all of you and the panelists and answer all possible questions to learn more. Thank you.
Fantastic. And finally, Rebecca.
Yes, thank you. Again, glad to be here. And I wanted to tell a little bit about what I'm doing for Tracx here to kind of clarify. I'm actually running a services division within Tracx software. So Tracx takes care of tracking all the enterprise-level data for social media, and I'm helping customers who have the software kind of do reports and do some strategy on top of that. This is the second time I've run a services division within a software company around social media. I actually started out in traditional media years ago with some broadcast and print magazine work in my background. So I'm very excited to, again, learn from the panelists today. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And I thought a really nice way to start the webinar would be indeed with our first poll, just to try and get a snapshot of who's here and indeed the kind of viewpoints on the overarching theme of today's topic. So just to highlight to the audience, you can only select one answer, and I'll give you around about 15 seconds to do so. And the question is, to what extent do you feel your company is leveraging your social data effectively? So relatively overarching at this point, but to what extent do you feel your company is leveraging your social data effectively at this point? Of course, we have option A, very effectively, and then effectively, improvement required, or significant improvement required. So you can only vote once. I'd ask if you can do so now. Fantastic, thank you very much, and we should have our results coming in very, very, very shortly. Thank you to all of those who voted, appreciate that, and we'll have a couple of other polls throughout the course. And as we can see here, so we only have about 16% saying either effectively or very effectively, and the vast majority of the audience is an improvement required or significant improvement required. Perhaps somewhat unsurprisingly, it's great to hear that you haven't got all the answers already, otherwise we wouldn't be doing a great job in terms of putting this webinar out there. But firstly, over to you, Angela. Perhaps you could just firstly give us your thoughts on these results, but also, I suppose, why it's important, the ultimate importance in going about actually leveraging your social data effectively. Hello, Angela. Sorry, I was just coming over to you. I just wanted to get your thoughts on those results and also why you feel it's important that leveraging your social data effectively is so important to the business as a whole.
Sorry about that. Hope you can hear me. For some reason, my line appeared to be muted. I apologize, Jack and team. The results don't surprise me at all, especially in this fast-moving world of digital and social, right, where we can always optimize and improve. At Intuit, for example, we put great emphasis on getting close to our customers to inform our priorities, our roadmap, how we can solve their biggest problems. And this approach can include formal interview research, right? Traditional research, poll surveys, follow me home visits. Follow me homes at Intuit are pretty legendary, where we literally follow our customers to their office or home to see their behavior, how they use our products, et cetera. And we do a lot more. But, you know, I think we recognize that our presence in these arenas can really skew responses, whereas with social, we have an opportunity to listen and take in raw, uncensored feedback, see uncensored behavior, which really is incredibly valuable when we try to look at, especially in our group, on how small businesses and self-employed track their finances, how they put those insights into improving their business to fuel success. There is a lot of data and a lot of metrics out there, so we do our best to prioritize on the precious few data that we consider to be actionable. I know we'll speak to that quite a bit during this webinar, which is really exciting to me.
Fantastic. And just coming over to you, Rebecca, obviously the vast majority of the audience have highlighted this is an area which requires improvement. But on your side, what does leveraging social data effectively ultimately mean to you, and what is the motivation behind doing so?
Well, I was actually going to ask if you should maybe add another option to your query about, I was giving them what they wanted 5 minutes ago, and all of a sudden it changed. Because that's kind of the pace that things are going at right now, and you know, I feel the pain of companies struggling to keep up with that. But I think it's really about giving people what they want. I think it means finding that sweet spot between the social community, like what they want and what they need, and what the brand has to offer them. And then creating content around that, and then finally measuring its performance. You know, that can mean a lot of things, you know, giving them what they want. But I think the motivation is, you know, the brand obviously wants awareness and business development, and finding that nexus spot from where it overlaps with what folks are expressing needs around. I think that's what it really means to leverage the data on social.
Fantastic. And finally, Giovanni, I mean, what does, I suppose, success look like for you and for Dell when it comes to leveraging social data effectively?
Yeah, let me steal one line that Rebecca just said, giving people what they want. I enlarged the scope of that line, not just to customers and users in general, because to me that's an evidence we need to give answers, be present, and not only limit to social care in the sense of limiting to the content that the traditional voice channel would give, but also make sure that we have the data that gives us internally within the company the visibility to the leadership team that speaks the same language as the rest of the contact centers. I think it's no secret if I say that social media is definitely here to stay. It's no longer a revolution, it's a reality, but it's still, let's say, a drop in the ocean in terms of volume compared to traditional contact centers. So we need to have visibility and credibility. No matter how good we are, if we don't speak the same language in terms of numbers and data of the traditional contact centers, it's going to be challenging to continue. So luckily, we're not in a challenging position right now, but that's something that has to be kept up. So giving people what they want to me is external, of course, that's our priority, but also internal to make sure that our visibility and consistency is there.
And indeed, that issue with consistency and collaboration internally, of course, is for many large companies a challenge. But coming over to you, Angela, if you could identify and perhaps explain what your biggest challenge has been or continues to be when trying to develop actionable insights, so something that you will truly be able to, that will impact your future social strategy and wider business strategy. Again, what has been the biggest challenge in developing this actionable insight?
Sure, you're tossing that to me, Angela.
Yes.
You know, for us, I think it's part volume and velocity. There's a lot of data out there. How do you, the sheer volume can make it a challenge to incorporate into our existing operational mechanics when it comes to how do you filter through the noise and find the right stuff. You know, Rebecca touched on a term that we use a lot here as well, which is sweet spots. If you think of a Venn diagram, where do your customers' interests and needs intersect with what you do well? And so focusing on that area and then using the social data to how it's expressed, whether in your communities or on Twitter or Facebook or whatever those communities are or social areas are where your constituents or prospects or current customers are expressing themselves, is to set up a framework that has the main conversational themes. And being able to follow that. So until we had the framework, it was very challenging for us to sift through the data. And sometimes you just have to take your best guess to get started and refine it from there. But for us, I think the overwhelming issue to get towards a successful model was just getting past the sheer volume and filtering it down into usable areas that were meaningful for our customers, but also for us.
And actually, that's a really interesting point. I was going to come over to Rebecca with that. And actually, the challenges of many of your clients in terms of collating the structured and unstructured data from multiple touch points. How are companies currently going about getting around that challenge of sheer mass coming in from so many different angles?
So one example could be to kind of work things backwards. So you could sort of start from taking a look at the cluster of your audience and seeing them as real people, and then stepping backwards to see them as a demographic profile, and then stepping back again to see the data and see them as a category, and then that turns into a target audience group. You do this 39 times, and quickly this is, this starts to become, a little bit more digestible. But yeah, like Angela was saying, the framework is incredibly important, and the method at which you approach the data. So coming at it with a hypothesis that's kind of an informed one, and then chipping away at it from there has always been a good approach.
And in terms of developing this hypothesis, Rebecca, I mean, what might be the first stage of doing so? What have you seen in your experience? How do companies come to that unified hypothesis and that unified approach?
It's actually kind of similar to how journalists put together stories, if I can draw that parallel. you start by reading a lot, researching a lot, and understanding a lot of what you're looking at, and then kind of asking a question from kind of a neutral standpoint.
Fantastic. And we talked about the combination of both kind of trying to collate structured and unstructured data. The fact that you've been at Dell for so long, Giovanni, kind of is indicative that perhaps you have seen the challenges surrounding social data analysis and actually aligning the new types of data perhaps with the existing and traditional analytics that perhaps many people are used to. So as a company, as an individual, how have you gone about kind of tackling this challenge and making this transition?
Yeah, well, on social, you do not, at least we do not only receive the traditional contact centers questions. In social, there are conversations about on topics that customers would never make a phone call about to contact centers. So it's not a technical support issue. It's maybe not a logistic issue. It's just a conversation. So we cannot possibly apply all the metrics that are the traditional KPIs of standard contact centers. So we decided to focus on the customer experience alone. Customer experience, of course, there is the classic CX or CSAT surveys, which we are now triggering on a regular basis in every language. And then we decided to go for the few key metrics that make sense to us and to customers. So the challenge was really to focus on these key metrics like service level, time to resolve, number of interactions, and of course, customer experience. All the rest, we decided to keep an eye on it, but not use it to measure our activity. Otherwise, we would actually push our own specialists and community managers to do something different from what should be done on social media. We didn't want that. We wanted that to be about the customer. It has to be about the customer. Customer or existing customer, future customer, it doesn't really matter. As long as we have a conversation on social media, we want that to be meaningful. So our metrics are the same as the traditional contact centers, but not all of them, just the selected ones.
Before we move on to our second poll, I suppose a nice way to summarize the first kind of section and coming to you, Angela, bearing the numerous challenges that have been mentioned in relation to turning social data into actionable intelligence, what would you recommend as the best first step that one can take in trying to turn social data into truly actionable insights? I mean, Rebecca mentioned the approach of working backwards, so I'm going to have to force you to go with something else if that is indeed your insight and your approach as well.
Well, it's interesting because I actually started off as a journalist, so I have a lot of respect for the methodology that Rebecca used. And it's interesting because you can start with a hypothesis, right, and being able to work backward. But I think the first step is starting with your objectives. What is it that you're trying to do, and how can data get you there? If you don't have the information, you're basically throwing darts at the wall and hoping that one of them sticks. And so I think the important thing to do is to start with objectives and to understand where your customers are, right? The psychographics, the demographics, where are they actually participating? And once you understand where they're participating and where they're talking and where they're sharing, that's where you go in and start to build your hypotheses, right? And being able to test those and measure those. From there, there's truly a ton of data that you could act upon, but laddering that back up to your company, your division's goals, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think you can, model it in a variety of different ways depending on what your goals are. But, the goal here is that, they're people and their audiences, and how do you ladder that back up to the true, demographic, psychographic data.
Fantastic. And actually, in actual fact, we've just had a kind of wave of questions come in on the chat box, which is great. It seems that people are kind of waiting 15 minutes before they're firing the questions at us. So I actually want to go to one of those before we move to our next poll. It's actually from Cynthia Laurel. And the question is, are your teams tackling the social data via knowledge teams or via customer service? Who is actually doing the data sifting? I'm going to send that over to you, Giovanni.
Yeah, we have Intel. We have a global analytics team, and there are a few people in this team who are actually 100% dedicated to us, to social media, social care, social support. They're fully dedicated. They extract the data every week, and they're extracting the data from two sources. The classic outreach, which is the reactive posture in terms of responding and engaging on customer queries, and they're also analyzing data on the proactive piece, on posts that we create and push out to customers to see their reactions and see what kind of interactions we generate, if it's more queries or simply just interactions on the brand itself. Going back to what you said before, I think that's the way to start. I totally agree with what Rebecca, what Angela was saying. There's no point in starting with data on a strategy. It has to, on all the data on a strategy, it has to start, in my opinion, from active listening and the data only on the listening, what people are talking about, where they are, what they're saying about your product, and then you can use more data to build your strategy. But that, to me, the listening piece, it has to be the starting point.
Fantastic. And again, just because we have so many questions coming through, I would love to move to the next poll, but what I don't want to do is kind of forget about these questions. So I'm gonna ask one final one before we move on, and that's from Irene Choi. And I'm gonna send this over to you, Rebecca. How can companies go about measuring the monetary or non-monetary value of one fan or one follower or one subscriber? That has many similar questions have come across actually linking to that, but I used Irene's as an example. So how do you go about measuring the monetary or non-monetary value of that one individual?
I think there's a couple of ways. It's kind of similar to how we did it with the value of an email subscriber or the value of a conversion through Google Analytics. You could start by attaching an arbitrary dollar value, and then watching the conversion take place and seeing what and then track it back from the purchase to see what each was actually worth. Another way, and this is very granular, but clients could use specific exclusive coupons that go out to only social, and what's the conversion rate on those coupons and how much money did that bring in. That's just kind of one example of, do you really want to pin a dollar amount to a person? Great. Here's one very specific way to go about that. How to scale that, it could get difficult, but it's very similar to how you could do it in Google Analytics or email.
And actually, the same question to you, Angela. I mean, do you do that? Do you pin a dollar amount to one person, or in actual fact, you go about measuring the value of a fan, a follower, a subscriber in a different way?
Actually, we do it in a variety of ways depending on what we're looking at. So, for example, when we look at, is it a first click attribution to where they've been exposed to us before, and they haven't been exposed to us before, and what is the value of bringing them into your tribe, so to speak? So if they discover us through a friend sharing an interesting article or a live chat or a list of tips from our branded community, we've just introduced them to a concept and we've brought them in. If they actually sign up and become a member in our community, we look at that as a very valuable transaction as far as acquiring them into our customer journey, right? That can be less expensive. For example, cost of acquisition for our community could be as low as $2 versus a higher acquisition cost if they came in through a paid media campaign. So that's one way of looking at it. Another way of putting a value on it is sentiment. If we have an opportunity to engage with people and make it a good outcome, we have just turned possibly a neutral or a negative into a positive. And these days, most everybody expresses their interactions through social media, especially when it's negative. We hope that people will have a positive experience and share that too. And then overall, we put a value when it comes to Net Promoter Score. How willing is a customer to recommend us, and how strong is that recommendation? And if that's expressed through social and amplified through social and helps with conversion numbers, then, so much the better.
Fantastic. Well, there are a number of other questions, and the questions coming in are fantastic, everyone, by the way. So please do keep them flowing in. But many people are talking ultimately about how you go about sharing those insights once you have developed them internally as well. And that actually is a nice kind of segue into our next poll. So ultimately, how do you go about sharing the wealth? So ensuring the right insights are delivered to the right department to positively impact decision making. So as you can should be able to all see, we have our second poll question, and that is, to what extent does your company have an established framework of insight sharing with regards to your social data? So to what extent are you sharing your insights and information developed from your social data around the company? So the first answer, a very well established and functioning framework. Number two, an established framework which functions adequately. A vague framework is in place, however, improvement is required, or no framework whatsoever. So I'll just give you another 5 seconds to vote. Thank you very much for all who are doing so, and we should have the answers coming up. So it's more of an even spread across, but again, still weighted heavily on kind of C and D answers. So either a vague framework or actually having no framework in place. Coming back to you, Angela, I'm interested to get your reaction on this. Firstly, why do you think many companies are yet to develop a framework of insight delivery, a framework of insight sharing? And also, do you have an established framework of insight sharing?
I'll take the last question first. Yes, we do have a framework for sharing insights, and I think the first battle to overcome is like with any new technology, right? It's a learning. It's a learning, and how do we actually make this work for us, or will it work for us? And so it's part education. It's part, I think, enablement in giving somebody a framework or a templated approach that they can start with, right? And to give proof of concept. That has been huge in my career over the last few years of showing folks how this can work and how it can work successfully. The framework we have internally, one framework is called Voice of the Customer. I mentioned earlier when we started the call that customer feedback and getting close to our customers is one of the reasons we've been so successful. And we're taking that to other markets as well, outside North America. But really understanding that customer is huge to us and is key to our success in being able to optimize and prioritize what we do next with our products. So not only in social data, but within the product itself, and then external to that through normal frameworks, we really try to bring that voice of customer into everything that we do. Social data has been a recent addition to that, and it can be a challenge with the real-time framework because you really want to be responsive versus reactive. And I know that can be a nuanced thing, but knee-jerk reactions can be painful, especially the way things take off in social, and if it has certain velocity. Sometimes you just need to take the old PR approach, respond, but then watch what things happen in order to make sure that this is something that is real or this is something that is temporary, et cetera, et cetera. So the real-time insights can be a challenge when it comes to, okay, what does this really mean? How quickly do we have to respond? Do we need to respond, or do we let this play out and let our followers and our customers answer it for us? So that's something that we're still looking to improve and incorporate more deeply throughout and embed it throughout the entire organization.
And certainly the challenge of generating and then sharing real-time insights is a huge part of the conversation, and indeed we will come to that in a little while. Just before we move on, just Giovanni, I know that Dell are obviously committed to sharing insights with as many departments as possible, be that kind of product development, etc., to really ensure that you are a kind of data-driven company and you are improving your decision-making all the time based on what you're seeing on social. What do you see as the important first steps in establishing a framework of insight social delivery, and I suppose what does your framework look like?
Yeah, we do it at 2 levels. Okay, the first one is more on communication slash, let's call it internal marketing. So we have people dedicated to internal newsletters internal social platforms like Chatter, for example, or using content being shared through everyone's social. And that's more on our own internal brand. That's how we share weekly or bi-weekly our achievements, our key content, and how actually other departments can benefit out of it, especially the sales reps, on how they can actually share our own content to their own customers so that they are aware even sometimes before purchasing. The second one is more operational and project-led. So it's always based on figures, it's always based on metrics, but we have dedicated project leads who are in charge of saying, okay, this is the data where our customers are talking about our technical support. This is our data where customers are talking about our sales support, or our product support and factory. And every time we make this data, we put it into a dedicated bucket, and our project managers are in charge of bringing that to each department on a regular basis to give visibility. Sometimes it's early warnings. There was a mistake on a website, and customers told us through social even before other departments could possibly see it, and we went directly to the department in charge of a page of our website, and that got corrected instantly. So that's one way to see things. So I would say two pillars here. One is the internal marketing and communication from us to other departments, and the second one is more the structured PM way to look at things.
Fantastic. And actual fact, yeah, it's a nice segue into, and you touched upon it earlier, Angela, I suppose the beauty of social listening and data and the real-time insights that they can provide. And coming back to you, Rebecca, how have brands that you've worked with ultimately ensured that insights are firstly surfaced as quickly as possible and then shared in a timely manner, allowing the right department, the right individual to react and respond as quickly? That could be the customer service function, or that indeed could be improving, adapting, and tweaking an ongoing social campaign that's already out there. So I know that was a very long question, but yeah, how would you go about ensuring the insights are surfaced quickly and then shared quickly?
So I have kind of a two-part answer to that. One is workflows. Because there are so many great tools out there that incorporate workflows into the platform, you can actually structure the workflow in such a way that it gets to the right department in a timely manner. You can structure workflows so that nothing gets published without approval from a certain department. But the tools that are out there right now are really sophisticated and really able to kind of help ensure the timeliness of these kinds of responses. Then the other part of this answer is kind of about corporate culture. I think it was The Economist did a piece last year about guts and gigabytes, and how we're kind of seeing a shift away from just gut reactions or just going on whatever your gut tells you, and going more towards, what does the data say? What are the comments that are coming through? So I think it's kind of, bottom up and top down. You've got the workflows coming through the software that you could be using that will help with that in a very timely and efficient manner. And then you've also got an evolution happening at the C-suite level that's more appreciative of incorporating data into the decision.
And there's been, you're probably unsurprised to hear, there's been a number of questions about how you go about communicating your data sets to those around you, those above you, so your C-suite. So in your experience, Rebecca, how have companies ultimately gone about getting buy-in at the highest level, and how have they structured their data? How have they communicated their data to the C-suites to make sure that they are becoming more of a social business and getting the buy-in that they desperately want?
They're tying a lot more of it back to the bigger goals of the business and the marketing goals for the quarter and for the year. They're doing a lot better job putting it into context when they deliver the social business information, and that's getting a better response from the C-suite. They're more appreciative of it instead of just having arbitrary quotes and anecdotes circulated. It's more in context now. It's more connected back to ROI and bigger pictures and campaigns. So I think that's helping a great deal.
Angela, we've obviously established or alluded to the fact that there still remains a bit of a difference between having the insights, having the information that your social data are providing you, and then actually using that. So for you guys at Intuit, how have you instilled a culture that embraces these insights and that ensures that you are being data-driven, not just your social department, but the company more widely?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, our founder, Scott Cook, to this day, will go out and talk to customers, and he preaches the goods, right? That the shortest answer to your question and likely the best answer to your questions will come from the customer. And so the culture already exists here, and it's a very strong culture at Intuit for insights-driven approach, but not everybody stays at the company for their lifetime, right? So there is a framework to indoctrinate or to teach, to share with those of us that are new to Intuit and haven't spent our whole career here. And it's a really strong outfit, and it sits within both within marketing, but also within our experience design group, our XD group. And so it's interesting that it not only sits within data and insights and metrics, but there's an actual research group within our experience, our customer experience. So that culture already existed when I got here, which is fantastic, and it is one of the reasons that I came here, right? So they are well practiced and very strong and very talented and have significant expertise in how to take insights and find those drill downs and bring them into the decision-making process, especially if you're coming from an experience point of view, is being able to put that right in front of the customer and watch their reaction to it, track their eyeballs, et cetera, et cetera. Within social, it's interesting because we can put a campaign out there, and the campaign may be as simple as, we're going to create a toolkit for you to use in your business to track your financial performance. So we can see the number of downloads. We can see how people get there either through Google or paid or through social, right, by putting the right tracking codes or tracking links within our links and all that kind of stuff. But then to actually watch the reaction as expressed in social has helped us improve that content, those toolkits, right, those actions. We've actually used polls within our community, and we're starting to incorporate polls within Twitter and in Facebook, right? We do that as well to get real-time insights to say, did this work? Did this not work? What is challenging you? What is not? What do you want? What do you don't want? Et cetera, et cetera. So to be able to get that real-time that real-time feedback and then share it within the organization. We have our internal capabilities as well to actually share that data. Is really powerful stuff, and we can act on it immediately or bake it into our future planning process.
Fantastic. And I was going to run that over to Giovanni and Rebecca, but in actual fact, again, we have so many questions coming through. What I don't want to do is run out of time and actually miss out some of the great insights and the great questions coming through from our audience. So I'm gonna come to a question from Roger Stone. It actually kind of comes back to this idea of I suppose linking your different data sets, linking different interactions. So Giovanni, for you, the question is how successful has Dell been in linking interactions from one person using different social platforms, and how have you gone about doing so?
Yeah, it's actually more language related in the biggest languages. I'm talking about Chinese, English, Portuguese, and Spanish. As we have many team members, we manage to train them on one, maximum two specific platforms so that I can actually focus on it and work on it during their shift. In the smaller regions, in the smaller countries where we have the same platforms, but for, of course, smaller number of people visiting our pages, we have agents and community managers who are actually working on different platforms at the same time. The volume allows it. That means that they are not really getting confused between tweets and posts and content on Facebook or on a community forum. So it really depends on the size of the language.
And next question coming from Sean, and I'm gonna send this over to you, Angela. How do you go about recommending a way to connect all this great social data that you have to contact records that already reside within an enterprise, or already reside within a CRM or a transaction/purchase history. How do you, I suppose, tie that all together?
Yeah, that is a challenge, especially when you're operating on third-party platforms where you don't necessarily get that data, right? So the best place to get it is from your customer. And when you're building that CRM profile with whichever program you're using, is to ask your customer if they're willing to share their social data with you. So many of our customers reach out via social to Intuit's care organization, into QuickBooks, for example, our QuickBooks care team. But they really don't want to have to go to a different handle, right? If they just shout it out, they're just going to shout it out to QuickBooks, for example, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter. And so for us to be able to connect that back to their care profile takes a couple of steps. But I tip my cap to our care organization, because they're so active and they're so good at monitoring. The response times that they have are incredible, especially with what can be some complex issues. So it really helps when the customer does share their social data. That way we can, that first step in saying, oh yeah, we talked to them last week. Here's the tweet exchange, or here's the direct message exchange, and here's the record in the customer data. Just going to that extra level of recognition, of awareness, of knowledge, and relationship building, it makes the customer experience exponentially better. So I heartily recommend folks that you include do you have a social handle that you want to share with us, in case you want to communicate with us, and that's the easiest way to communicate with us, for example. That's the best way to get that data. And then, of course, if you have their emails and stuff, there are things you can do on the back end to do that as well. But our customers have been great about sharing that information with us.
And the same question over to you, Rebecca, actually, and just in case you didn't quite hear it, it's coming from Sean Robinson. How do you recommend connecting all the great social data that you're collecting to contact records that already reside within an enterprise, such as a CRM? And do you have any examples of some of the companies that you've worked with doing this ultimately to create a more holistic view and a holistic understanding of an individual customer?
Yes. So we've worked with clients on, we refer to them as influencers. So that doesn't necessarily mean they're a celebrity. It just could mean that they're a brand advocate, or they're communicating with your brand. So having a way of working with them so that we can see data about them, how many different social platforms they're on, adding a new social platform like Angela mentioned to their record, if they'll share it with us, and then kind of tagging. I think tagging is probably the next step after everything that Angela just said, to organize and group them, and so that after you get done with the personal conversation with them, you've got them tagged in your system, so you kind of have a quick reference guide, and if you ever need to go back and have any other kind of communications around everybody with the same tag, you've got all of that work done already.
Fantastic. And interestingly, this question is very pertinent, because this is linked to our final poll, which is surrounding actually using your social data to build a fuller customer profile. So I'd be interested to hear our kind of views of our audiences and see where they're at with this particular challenge. So again, our third and final poll, you can only answer one question, and the question is, to what extent do you feel your current analysis of your social data is providing you with a comprehensive view of your customer? So number A, yes, it provides us with a 360-degree understanding of your customer. If that is the case, then fantastic. Number 2 provides us with a relatively thorough understanding. Number 3 provides us with a reasonable understanding, or currently tells us very little about our customers whatsoever. So just trying to gauge to what extent people are able to generate this holy grail of a 360-degree understanding of each individual customer. I'll just give you a couple more seconds to vote, and we should have the results coming up on the screen any time now. Thank you again for all those. So we do indeed have 1% who are saying they've got a 360-degree understanding. Fantastic. Congratulations. But everyone else, there can be that improvement required. And indeed, that is the Holy Grail. Indeed, that is what has been communicated to us in the build-up to this webinar, really trying to build a fuller, more comprehensive customer profile. And coming to you, Giovanni, I suppose, how do you make this transition from your social data providing with you a few nuggets of valuable insight here and there to this holy grail of a full and comprehensive customer profile? Where does the transition come? What are the challenges in the way, and how do you get there?
The challenge is, as usual, time. Okay, the data is not a problem because it's there. There's a lot. I would say our approach is pretty much daily. Okay, we have daily input from our analytics team on what's happening on the customer-facing side of the social media world. So every interaction is analyzed, measured on everything: the experience of the customer, the experience, the solution, how meaningful was the answer, how useful was the answer, how long did it take, how many interactions. So we have all level of details on what was the question about, the content and the reaction and the action taken from us to close it, and how long it took. So we have everything from standard KPIs to quality to customer experience. And we are, I would say, we leaders are playing a role of data gurus at the same time, because we want to receive this kind of visibility daily. I know it's probably sounding like a lot of work. It's not, because on a day-to-day basis you don't have millions of numbers to look at. It's just a few key numbers, the ones that are in a review scenario. We have them under our eyes every single day. So we know that if we need to take an action, we take it almost in real time. And I think that's what matters to the internal leadership as well as to our customers. Everything is immediate.
Fantastic. And the same question actually over to you, Angela. The idea of a really comprehensive customer profile, and indeed you mentioned at the start the approach of Intuit, following their customers home to really try and generate a meaningful and a valuable connection with them. How have you generated this more in-depth understanding? So you are looking at individuals, not just markets.
Correct. Yeah, we are looking at individuals and almost like a proxy or personas, especially when you look at something as wide-ranging as small businesses or self-employed, right? A lot of people think self-employed, for example, I work as a freelancer, I work as a consultant. A lot of people assume that everyone wants to be a mogul and have a huge company, when in reality that's really not the case. We have all kinds of self-employed people. People who've been doing it for years. They say I'm a graphic artist or a photojournalist or I'm a realtor. Not everyone wants to go out there and build the next, empire in real estate. A lot of people don't want to have people working for them. But in the past, people spoke to them as if they did. They just assumed they were just really small businesses. And so our social data has been critical in providing that comprehensiveness, right, and understanding of what people want to do, because, again, that uncensored feedback, that uncensored descriptors of what it is that they're trying to do. It's really added a different layer and a tangible layer of understanding and filament, right, of what someone looks like and what it is that they're trying to do. So I wouldn't say that social data provides the full 360-degree understanding of the customers. We're just one slice, right, of the pie, but it's a very important slice. And hopefully we'll be able to continue to improve what we do here to give us even a more fuller understanding of who people are and what their goals are.
Once again, we have so many questions to get through, and 50 minutes has just absolutely disappeared. So I'm going to try and rattle through as many as we can. Thank you for everyone for holding on. Indeed, our speakers as well, because as I say, there is so many questions here to be asked. So I'm going to try and ask a few final ones. And coming over to you, Rebecca, we have a question from David Pickett, who asked, in terms of the companies that you worked with, is there a difference in the lifetime value of a customer acquired via social media compared to other channels? And does that relate to the number of contacts or breadth of channels the clients interact with?
So let's answer the first one. So yes, there are lifetime values. Folks who are fans of a Facebook page have a track record of making more purchases than folks who are not fans of a brand Facebook page. There are slight differences between B2C and B2B, but it's interesting because we've seen more data being collected about people who will become a fan or a follower on a regular basis and not just do it as part of a current campaign. People who actually convert to being a lifetime customer do have a higher dollar value than folks who don't. And then remind me again, the second part of that question.
Yeah, the second part of that question was actually, relating to the first part, does it relate to the number of contacts or breadth of channels that the clients interact with?
No, it doesn't. There have been, because I've worked with a variety of sizes of companies, and some of those companies who don't have the resources to be on every social media platform, who have dedicated themselves to maybe just a select few, have seen probably the same percentage results in terms of seeing a value from those who are engaging with them on those platforms. In fact, it might actually be a little bit higher when they've narrowed it down to a select few platforms because they were more engaged and had a more intimate relationship with their fans and followers.
That's great. And coming over to you, Giovanni, I have a question from Gianmarco Fretti, who asks, leaving out the feasibility, actually, what would be the most effective period? So day by day, weekly, monthly, yearly, to summarize your social data to try and develop consistency and develop a holistic understanding. So again, leaving out the feasibility side, what do you think would be the most effective period in terms of this summarization?
I would suggest, given the feasibility, I would suggest weekly and then monthly views, consolidated monthly views coming from weekly analytics.
Fantastic. And throwing that over to you, Angela, would you say the same?
Yeah, we have both our real-time analytics with the care organization for the voice of the customer. We have weekly performance, especially when we're in the middle of a campaign, right, which we just completed with the Super Bowl. Having both, on the hour or in real time, plus daily and weekly data was hugely valuable to us for that specific campaign. But the deeper dives that we take back to the business are organized on a weekly and monthly basis, and then overall with a quarterly business review.
And I know you mentioned actually you were going to just kind of separately to me, you were going to back up what Rebecca was saying in relation to the value of a social fan with some of your analyst data. So I'd love to let you kind of explain that.
Sure. So when I worked for a previous brand, and without my knowledge, Forrester did a study on the value of a Facebook fan and compared our brand with Walmart, Coca-Cola, and another retailer. I believe. I'm trying to remember exactly. It's about 3 or 4 years ago. But, obviously the platforms have changed since then, become much more of a paid distribution model. But the value of that fan, even now, is huge, right? They spend more. They're more loyal, they advocate more, and they tend to stay with a brand longer once they fanned you. So that's pure analyst data, and it was objective data. And I found that to be extremely valuable social proof to share with our executives at the time. It definitely got us more investment and much more street cred within the marketing organization, but overall, because we bring back insights not only to the marketing organization, but to the organization as a whole to say, here's what our product marketing team, for example, here's what you think the copy says and means, but here's what it means to the customer. Here's what they're expressing. They don't get it. We need to make changes. So the fans' ability to help us optimize our process is huge. That could have taken us a 6-month rotation to figure out, is this working, is it not? Instead, we had real-time feedback that we could take back and change the copy in our marketing to make it much more effective.
Fantastic. And coming to you, Rebecca, the kind of more forward-thinking questions, which we've had a couple of. Do you see any big changes on the horizon with regards to social data analytics and ultimately the way in which customers are generating actionable customer insights and also the way in which they're sharing their companies? So, what does the horizon look like in 2017?
Well, that depends on privacy laws. Just kidding. Um, so, um, so right now, we're spending about $500 billion a year on marketing and about $9 billion a year on customer service. I think that's going to change a bit in the future. I think we're going to see more brands investing in customer service because I think they're going to understand that that's such a valuable part of building their brand reputation online in social. I think we are going to see a movement away from vanity metrics. I think we've already started to see that thanks to leadership from companies like Dell and Intuit with movement towards measuring data that matters. And I think the way that we share actionable insights is going to become more sophisticated in the business realm this year. I think teams are going to learn kind of how to integrate their social business data a little bit more. Google came out with this really cool tool from Think with Google called the Customer Journey Online to Online Purchase. And I think things like that are going to help drive the sophistication of how we see social integrated into the changes coming ahead.
Fantastic. And Giovanni, for you to round up, what's your pennies worth in terms of what's on the horizon in relation to social data in 2017?
Well, let me put it this way. To me, when I look at the numbers on social platforms related to Dell or other brands, I don't see spikes. I see a linear line going upwards week on week, slowly but steadily. Okay, so to me that proves that the scaling is there. I want that scaling to be driven by customers. I want them to tell me where we're going. That's why we are going to invest even more on active listening. And in parallel to the active listening, and this is one suggestion I give to everyone who wants to jump on a strategy to launch a brand on social media, is not only get the data from day one. Do not expect something from day one. Data listening, active listening, and collecting data can take some time. Once you have that, you have already an idea on what customers are saying about your brand and about your products. After that, do not go and engage directly with customers because I didn't see that as effective. Make sure that the engagement piece is accompanied by good content production. Content production is digital marketing applied to whatever your company sells. We have computers and certain IT-related services. Our content production is not just marketing about advertising and promos. It's actually about talking about our solutions and what makes sense to customers. So in the future, this is what I see: active listening together with people who can actually take the active listening data and build content out of it to better serve the customers and anticipate their needs.
Thank you once again for that answer, Giovanni, and the insight. And what I can say is thank you to all our speakers. I mean, what has been really nice about today's discussion has been some of the different perspectives from the speakers, but also the many listeners kind of commenting and getting involved on Twitter and the chat box as well, indicative of the many different companies, the many different industries, job roles, and of course geographic locations involved in the webinar. Unfortunately, given the time, it's now the end of questioning, the end of the webinar. We have overgone by a little bit, right, about 25%, but it's purely as a result of the quality of the answers and the quality of the questions. Apologies if I was unable to get round to your question. Please feel free to tweet at us following, and also, of course, get in touch with our speakers as well. And with that, I'd love to thank our speakers for today, Angela, Giovanni, and Rebecca, for their insight and their contributions. And of course, thank you to you, our listeners, for getting involved and making the quality of discussion that much better. Before everyone leaves to get their first or indeed their last coffee of the debate, depending on where you are, we will be sending out the webinar recordings early next week, so no worries if you did indeed miss some of the discussion. You can follow up on that early next week. What is more, the numerous other questions that came through on the chat box, The only one positive I can say is that you can indeed have those questions answered in person by many leaders in the social space that will be speaking and attending at the Corporate Social Media Summit in June. As mentioned at the start, the event brings together around about 50 leading corporate speakers in the social and digital space, and around about 350 senior corporate peers as well. And that will be in New York on June the 20th and 21st, not the 21st and 22nd, as I incorrectly stated at the start. And again, you can see some of the great brands who are going to be involved on the screen there. Do be sure to check out the summit brochure. A link to that has just been sent in the chat box. You can find out the other core challenges and priorities that the social community has flagged to us over the last couple of months that will be being discussed at the event. Thank you once again for joining us. Thank you again, a huge thank you to our speakers. And the only thing left to say, I hope everyone has a lovely rest of their day. Thank you.